Hey everyone, Stacy Shore couldn't make it to your event, and so she put out a word and asked if anyone could come and speak. I responded, however, I can't actually come down there. I'm up in St. Charles County. It would be a little over a 3-hour drive for me to get down there, but I promised that I could at least record a video, and the request was to get you guys caught up on SB727. That is the education bill, the school choice bill that has been much the talk these days. So my name is Jeremy Jacobs. I am the St. Louis chapter leader of Bound for Life. I've been doing that for almost 20 years, advocating and particularly praying on the issue of life in our state and for our nation. And a couple of years ago, after praying for, I think maybe 16 years at that point, 15, 16 years, for government on the issue of life, decided that I would start getting more involved with our state government. So I chose a day of the week. That's generally Wednesday. During session, I go to Jefferson City, the hour and 40-minute drive from my house into Jefferson City, and spend the day there. I have generally stayed on the issue of life and advocated for pro-life bills and against pro-choice bills that are in the Capitol. That's kind of where, obviously, that's where I've spent my time in ministry and where my focus has been. But as a homeschool child, I was homeschooled as a child and a homeschool father. I've been around the homeschool or involved in the homeschool community for almost 40 years. And when this issue came up early in session, since I was already there, I kind of knew the issue was too near and dear to me to ignore. And so I jumped in with both feet and have been entrenched in the fight on SB 727 for the past couple of months. And I regret to inform you that as of a couple of hours ago, this morning, I think around 11 a.m., 727 passed the House. So we're going to dive in a little bit to that, but I'm also going to back up and just talk about school choice as a bigger issue, so that everyone can kind of be informed about what it actually means to be a small, limited government conservative with regards to school choice. It's gotten a lot of popularity around the country in Republican circles, but as you guys know, as a Tea Party group, just because it's Republican doesn't mean it's small and limited government conservative. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. First, let me address a couple of specifics around 727. There was a lot in some local newspapers, some opinion articles, lots of social media around Second Amendment concerns in 727. So specifically, what the bill did was it started off as a 12-page bill, and within the span of, I think, about a half hour, went to 167 pages or 168 pages and passed out of the Senate with really almost no one really reading it. And in the week following that, maybe the second week following that, one of the researchers, one of the people that is involved deeply in this fight from the beginning, was reading it and discovered a serious problem. In the process of going from a 12-page bill to 160-something pages, they started changing a lot of statute. And because of the number of changes, they changed the definition. So currently in Missouri State Statute, it's 167.031, if I'm recalling correctly. Or actually, the definition is in 167.012. It defines homeschool as a school for only a few paragraphs of Missouri law. So there's a very narrow scope of Missouri law where a homeschool is considered a school. that definition only applies to that couple of paragraphs in Missouri law. Well, they started changing so much other statute that they needed to change that definition, and they got lazy. Rather than just going through and specifically section by section saying this definition applies here to this section, and this definition applies to this section and this section, they just blanket wrote, for the purposes of all Missouri state law, a homeschool shall be a school. That's a paraphrase, but it's basically, that's what it says, is for all of Missouri state law, a homeschool will be a school. Well, the implications of that are unknown. The word school is used in Missouri state statute currently over 1,500 times. And what does that mean for a homeschool to be a school? So Missouri state statute says that a registered sex offender can't live within, I believe, 1,000 foot of a school. Does that mean that every homeschooler who is now a school for the purposes of all Missouri law cannot live in neighborhoods where people are homeschooling? There are statutes about the sale of alcohol within so many feet of a school. Does that mean that any place, any establishment, or even a church function at which they serve alcohol cannot happen within that many feet, I forget what the number is, of a school or a home which people are homeschooling? We don't know the implications and what the court might say. So the Second Amendment concerns come with the understanding that firearms in general are not allowed on school property. So if a homeschool is now a school, what does that do for homeschoolers who have firearms on the property? There was a lot of legal debate, lawyers looking at this, and a number of people kind of fell on different sides of whether or not this was an issue or not. One of the most prominent constitutional attorneys, Missouri state constitutional attorneys, Dave Rowland, wrote a 7-page letter in which he detailed his concerns and saw it as a very legitimate concern. This man helped write our Second Amendment Preservation Act a couple years ago, and he's been deeply involved in writing many pieces of Second Amendment legislation. And he was very concerned about this. So whether or not it actually would have played out as a real concern, I don't know. I can't answer that. But one of the things that I've learned in looking at legislation is the question should always be asked, what is the worst that can happen with this legislation? And certainly as you look at it, you have to ask, what's the worst here? Well, the worst is it destroys a family or many families' lives as a woke prosecutor goes after families who have firearms in the home. We have one, I'm in St. Charles County, right next door to St. Louis County, and we have Kim Gardner here that I can see is highly likely would try to use a piece of legislation like this to destroy a family. So that's the background on the issue. And unfortunately, it passed this morning. And the fix for addressing these concerns was actually to pass a second bill that attempted to fix these concerns. That is HB2287. You can go look that up if you want. It's a House bill. It had been sent over to the Senate, and the Senate modified it some and passed it late last night at about 9 p.m. and sent it back to the House after those changes. And that passed along with SB727. And their hope is that this second bill, which helps to change or properly modify the definition of a homeschool, will fix the concerns, the 2A concerns. We have continuing concerns about this. HB2287, at first glance, appears to be vulnerable to a local or special law challenge. So this law may be challenged in court, and if a challenge is successful, it may be struck down. If HB 2287 is struck down, then what would remain would be the underlying SB727 that contains the language that is problematic. So the fix for the problem is actually another problem, because rather than having the backbone and the guts to go in and amend 727 and fix the language there in the bill, they added a second bill. And this creates a whole another set of issues where one bill could be found unconstitutional and leave all of the problems that exist in 727 open. So we are urging everyone to contact the governor's office and ask him not to sign either 727 or 2287. Again, that's Senate Bill 727 or SB 727, or House Bill 2287 or HB 2287. Neither of these should be signed by the governor, because if 2287 is struck down, the problems that many attorneys have had at this point with 727 would be exposed. All right, so since 727 has already passed, I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about what is being called school choice right now, and the reasons it's not a limited government conservative solution to the problem. I think we all acknowledge that there is a serious problem with public schools, that it is sincerely very, very, very broken. There's a lot of disturbing material and teachings coming out of the public school. Every day we turn on the news, we find another reason to be upset by the public school system, it seems. So it's very broken, and I fully acknowledge that. However, not everything that looks like a solution is the right solution to a problem. I think we can look just in the last couple of years and see that we had a particular problem with COVID, but just because we had a problem does not mean that the vaccine, for example, is the proper fix for that. So just because it looks like a solution doesn't mean it's the right solution. And that, I think, has been part of the root of the issue with Republicans and their drive to school choices. It looks like a decent solution on the surface, but it's not a conservative solution. And so let me jump into that a little bit and kind of explain why it's not. So I have a number of reasons to be against school choice. I'm just going to highlight 3 really quickly, and I'm going to move from kind of a common sense angle in the first one more to a philosophical angle in the third one. So starting with universities, if we look at the cost of a university education over the last 20 years, everyone would acknowledge that the price of a university education has been skyrocketing, at a rate much higher than inflation. The price of a university education has been skyrocketing. And that is due in large part to the availability of government money. And I think most people would acknowledge that the availability of grants, of zero interest loans for a university education has caused an effect similar to an increase in minimum wage, that over time it justifies the increase of price by the universities. If we inject government money into the private school system through school choice, it will have the same effect. In 10 years, we'll be looking back and wonder why the cost of a private school education has skyrocketed. I can tell you why. It's because government money got injected into the process. Providing parents with money to purchase a private school education is not the free market in action. It is crony capitalism, and it is a manipulated market. So in a few years, with the skyrocketed price of a private school education, the same parents who are currently priced out of being able to afford a private school education would be again priced out. And so we would see a short-term feel-good gain for some parents, but 10 years from now, we would be in the same boat with private school education costing more for everyone and probably pricing more out of the market than exists today. And then, like minimum wage, I guess we could continue to add more and more government money to the system until it's out of control, just like it is in the university system. A second reason to be against school choice is regulation. So Ronald Reagan famously said that the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." He also famously said, "With the shekels come the shackles." And the reality is anytime the government gives money, it comes with strings attached. And legislators looked at me in the face, in the eyes, with 727 and said, well, there aren't any strings here. But that's not true. There are some strings attached now and more strings on the way. That's always the way the system progresses. Legislators of the future or regulatory bodies in the state would begin to attach more and more requirements to get the money from the state. The money will come with strings attached. We always see that happen with government, and there is no reason to believe that more strings would not be coming in the future. So what that would do would be to devalue the value of a private school education or even homeschool education, but particularly private schools. Those that take the money would begin to be subjected to state testing and accreditation that would require them to teach certain subjects. Let's say, for example, a private school did not want to teach Darwinistic evolution and it wanted to teach only creationism. If the state came along and suggested that they were going to do standardized testing, and on that standardized testing that they were going to ask questions about Darwinistic evolution, well, the private school, in order to retain its funds, to keep getting its money, would have to begin to teach Darwinistic evolution or forego those funds and be much less competitive with the private schools around them that chose to make that choice of teaching Darwinistic evolution. And so you can see how the state begins to curb the rights of free speech and religion and press the private schools into conformity with what the state wants. So the regulatory burden coming, both now and much more in the future, is dangerous to both private schools and homeschools. We don't know what regulations might come on homeschools, but we can assume that near the same regulations would eventually come to homeschools. I believe, I'm going off memory here, but I believe Alberta, Canada, and I realize it's a different country, but our neighbor to the north, Alberta passed school choice a couple decades ago, and within 20 years, homeschooling was illegal. That's how quickly things moved from a system where there were private schools and homeschools. They passed school choice, and the regulatory burdens on particularly private schools and then cascading down to homeschoolers made it illegal to homeschool within 20 years. The last point I'll touch on here is a philosophy of limited government and what that looks like. A proper view of limited government is that the protection of rights should be driven to the highest level of government possible, and for lack of a better term, the administration of goods and services should be driven to the lowest level of government possible. So let me explain that a little bit. We have the U.S. Constitution, we have a Bill of Rights, and we are protecting things like the freedom of speech, or the right to keep and bear arms, the right to a trial by a jury of your peers, and on and on. There are rights that are protected at the federal level. There are more regional concerns, so the federal government reserved all power not given in the Constitution to the states. And there are certainly rights that are more regional in concern. So certain parts of this country have deserts and some do not. And so like right now in the Senate for the last couple of weeks, they've been talking about water rights. So there are a certain set of rights that cannot be managed at the federal level and should be managed at the state level. Education, rights around education might be one of those things that are properly held for the states. Notice I did not say providing for the education, but the right to an education. The administration of goods and services, however, should be driven to as low and as local of a level as possible. Our library system, for example, is easily managed at a city or county level. There's no need, nor is there currently a statewide library system that administers how the libraries in all parts of the state are done and public pushes books to the local library or anything like that. It's done well at a city level or a county level, and it should remain there. It's a local function. So that with any kind of good or service, as I'm using that term, the question should always be asked, can this be done at a more local level? Allowing things to be done at the local level allows citizens to get their hands on it and to change the way it's done. It is much easier to run for your local city council than it is to run for state rep or state senator. The cost to run is lower, the time investment is lower. It's easier for citizens to have a say in their local government than it is to have a say at the state level. And so anything that can be administered at a lower or more local level of government should be done so. There are certain things that aren't done well at a local level. Our state highway system would be an example of that, or a state militia. Those things need to be managed and administered at the state level. Schools, for the first 150 plus years in this country, were managed and administered at the local level. Missouri did not have funding for public schools at a state level until 1945. And that movement to fund education at the state level happened mostly in the 1940s. So that means for nearly 200 years from the founding of our nation, education was funded and administered at the local level. We successfully built a great nation, went through the Industrial Revolution on the foundation of a local town choosing to fund and build a schoolhouse, hire its teachers, and educate its children. The real limited government solution to the problem is not to continue to add to state structure and the administrative state of government, but to remove the state from the process and drive the control back to the local level. The push toward wokeness in our public schools has thrived in the ever-increasing bureaucracy at more and more levels of government where they can easily hide. And when we push the administration of schools back to the local level and get the state out of it, they will be exposed and unable to hide in the smaller bureaucracies. So the real small and limited government solution to the issue of our broken public school system is to reduce and remove the state involvement in the public school system and to allow local communities to control their schools again. It is not to add more structure and more administration to dole out funds to whomever the state sees fit that is properly in line with whatever administrators' woke values are so they can get their government cheese for their private schools. School choice is not the answer. It adds more government. It is not limited government in nature. I hope my little talk has been informative and informational for you. If you have any questions or you want to engage in a debate with me, you think I'm wrong, Here on the screen is going to be social media contact for both Twitter/X and Facebook. Feel free to reach out. Always interested in a good, healthy debate without name calling, or to help the cause. Again, I would urge everyone to contact the governor and ask him not to sign HB2287 and SB727. They are terrible pieces of legislation on many, many levels, and not the proper solution to the broken public school system. They will add to the problem in the long run and not correct anything. So thank you for your time, and I hope everyone has a nice evening.